He didn't have to yell, just one glare, and the whole room froze. The white suit shimmered, the long hair flowed, and that voice? It sliced through the air like a knife pressed to your neck. On screen, he was Youngblood Priest, a fearless cocaine dealer who flipped off the system, the police, and even Hollywood itself. But off-screen, he was Ron O'Neal, the man who turned crime into art and danger into power. Superfly barely cost $500,000 to make, yet it rocked America to its core. Black audiences cheered like they'd found a hero, while the media panicked, claiming the movie glorified crime. One actor, one role, one era shaken like never before. From the hard streets of Cleveland to the blinding lights of Los Angeles, Ron O'Neal rose up as a challenge to everything the industry thought it knew. He didn't just play danger, he was the danger. So what made people whisper that Ron O'Neal was the most dangerous man in Hollywood? Before he ever walked onto a set, he was just a skinny black kid growing up in a rough Cleveland neighborhood. No lights, no fame, just screeching streetcars, thick smoke, and the sting of rust from the factories. It was 1937. The Great Depression still had America in its grip. And for black families, equality was a dream that always felt one promise away. But in that harsh world, a young Ron was learning to really see, the pain, beauty, and truth around him, eyes that would later hypnotize Hollywood. Though he was born in Utica, New York, Ron grew up in Cleveland, surrounded by a city packed with factory workers chasing hope. His father, Ernest O'Neal, was once a gifted jazz musician, a clarinet and sax man who had lit up the stage in the 1920s. But racism and poverty snuffed out that dream fast. Ernest put down his instruments, along with his pride, and traded melodies for machinery in a factory. His wife, Eunice, gentle but strong, worked long hours at a hospital while raising 6 children on scraps and faith. 3 daughters, 3 sons. Ron was the middle one, often forgotten when dinner came down to cold beans and stale bread. Inside that small, worn-out house, a quiet truth lingered. Survival itself was an art form. Ernest never told his kids about his musical past. He hid his instruments in the attic like ghosts from another life. After Ernest's death, teenage Ron stumbled upon them by accident. When his hands touched the dusty saxophone, something deep inside him trembled. The story of a man who once dreamed but had to bury it to live. He was 16. Then, only 6 months later, tragedy hit again. His older brother died in a truck crash. 2 losses back-to-back left a wound in Ron's soul that would never heal. That day, he made a promise to himself. He would never die nameless in a factory. He would live a life he chose, no matter what it cost. Ron finished Glenville High School, a working-class school filled with kids from the factory's shadows. He wasn't the best student. Math and books bored him, but he studied people like a master. Friends said his stare could cut straight through you. That piercing look would later become his secret weapon on film. After high school, he enrolled at Ohio State University, trying to play by the rules. But after 1 semester, he dropped out. Poor grades, no direction, and the gut feeling that he didn't belong there. By 20, Ron had already lived through more pain than most men twice his age. Poverty, death, and the cold truth of being a black man in a white man's world. But those years shaped him into a storyteller with depth, a man who knew that pain wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to perform. In an interview years later, Ron said, "I saw my father die because he couldn't live." That single line said it all. He didn't want a dream that required him to shrink to survive. After leaving college, lost and uncertain, Ron took a factory job like his father once had, thinking maybe that was his fate. But then, in 1957, everything changed. A friend invited him to see the musical Finian's Rainbow at the legendary Karamu House, the oldest black community theater in Cleveland. For the first time ever, Ron saw people who looked like him commanding the stage, acting, singing, and shining with pride. It hit him like lightning. This was what life could feel like. "I was stunned," he said later, and that moment became the spark that would set his entire destiny on fire. Enjoying the video so far? Smash that like button and subscribe to Fame Drop so you're here for the next one. He later described it like this: "It was as if someone had kicked open a door to a world I never knew existed. That one night changed everything." After watching that performance, Ron jumped headfirst into the Karamu House troupe, setting off on a wild, grinding artistic journey that would shape him forever. From 1957 to 1964, he worked like a man possessed, training day and night, tackling every role he could get his hands on. From the determined Walter Lee in A Raisin in the Sun, to the fierce Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire, even slipping into lighthearted comedies and musicals like Kiss Me Kate. By day, he painted houses to keep food on the table. By night, he lived and breathed theater. He read scripts until his eyes burned, rehearsed until his throat gave out, and still pushed harder. "Karamu House was my school," he said proudly. "Except here, I didn't have to pay tuition. It was more than training, it was transformation." That old community theater taught Ron not just how to act, but how to feel, to read human emotions like a map, to see the hurt and hope hiding inside every role. Then in 1964, ambition pulled him out of Cleveland and straight into New York City, the restless heart of American art. He crashed in a tiny Harlem room, surviving off teaching gigs with the Harlem Youth Arts Program while bouncing between off-Broadway auditions. But the path ahead was ruthless. The stage and the screen were still haunted by racism, and Ron didn't fit their narrow mold of what a black actor was supposed to look like. His light skin and sleek hair made him too different, and casting directors didn't know what to do with that. At one audition for Ceremonies in Dark Old Men, the director rejected him the second he walked in. The next day, Ron came back wearing an afro wig, and suddenly the director grinned, saying, "Yeah, you look better now." That moment became a legend among actors. It showed how Ron understood the game. Sometimes you have to perform before you even get on stage. Through rejection after rejection, he refused to fold. In 1970, a small, unpaid project came his way, No Place to Be Somebody, written by Charles Gordon and produced by Joseph Papp at the Public Theater. Everyone told him to take a paying gig instead, but Ron didn't budge. "I choose what scares me," he said, "because only then do I know I'm alive." That fearless choice changed everything. The play was electric. It tore into the struggle for dignity and power inside the Black community, raw and unfiltered. No Place to Be Somebody became a cultural earthquake. It won the Pulitzer Prize, the first ever for a play by a Black writer, and Ron swept the Obie and Drama Desk Awards for his explosive performance. On stage, he became a scheming bar owner and pimp so captivating that audiences didn't know whether to hate him or cheer him on. Critics called him the discovery of the year. And just like that, Ron O'Neal had finally stepped out of the shadows. After nearly a decade of hustling through poverty, he'd made it, a true force in New York's art scene. But just as the stage lights found him, Hollywood came knocking. In 1971, he started landing small film roles in Move and the Organization. They weren't glamorous, but they were a start, tiny sparks before the explosion. Then one day, the phone rang. On the line was Philip Fenty, an old Cleveland friend turned screenwriter. He and director Gordon Parks Jr. were cooking up a daring, low-budget film about a Harlem cocaine dealer who wasn't a villain, but an anti-hero with brains, swagger, and power. Fenty told him straight, "I need someone with both brains and fire, someone audiences will trust and fear at the same time." Ron was intrigued and said yes, not realizing that the $500,000 film would flip the industry upside down. That project became Superfly. It was the turning point, the moment all those years of sweat and sacrifice finally paid off. After 15 years grinding from painting walls to mastering stages, Ron O'Neal was about to blow the doors off cinema as Youngblood Priest, the sharp-dressed hustler who made danger look like destiny. And just like that, the man in the white suit was born, the actor who made Hollywood tremble. It was the early 1970s, a time when America was rumbling with change, the Black Power movement, protests against war, a fight for equality, and a wave of new Black voices demanding space and respect. Out of that fire came a fresh genre, blaxploitation. Low budget, street-born films where Black people weren't background characters anymore. They were kings, queens, rebels, and survivors, bold, dangerous, seductive, and finally in control of their own story. The smash hit Shaft in 1971 proved something loud and clear. Audiences were hungry to see Black heroes rise up and take down the man. Just a year later, in 1972, a small independent film was born on the streets of Harlem, raw, rebellious, and shot guerrilla style with barely $500,000. They didn't even have proper permits. The crew literally stole electricity from street lamps to light their scenes. That wild little movie was Superfly. Director Gordon Parks Jr., son of the legendary photographer Gordon Parks, wanted to show the real Harlem. Gritty, alive, full of pain and rhythm, but pulsing with dreams of freedom. Screenwriter Philip Fenty, Ron O'Neal's old Cleveland friend, wrote a story that cut deep about a man both powerful and trapped. He knew only Ron could pull it off, and from that, Youngblood Priest was born, the man who made Hollywood watch in awe and fear. Priest was no ordinary hustler. He was a king in a white suit, a cocaine dealer with style and brains. He lived in a slick apartment lined with leather chairs, crystal chandeliers, and spotless white decor. He cruised the streets in a Cadillac Eldorado dressed up with a Rolls-Royce grille, rocking fur coats and wide-brimmed hats. He moved like a man who owned every inch of space he walked through. Smooth, confident, and just a little dangerous. But behind that cool exterior lived a tired soul. Priest hated the drug world that made him rich. He wanted out. His plan? One last big score. $500,000 to disappear forever and escape the invisible cage society built for poor black men. He wasn't chasing glory, he just wanted peace. And the right to control his own story. Ron O'Neal didn't just play Priest, he became him. With his shoulder-length hair, cold stare, and razor-thin smirk, he created an anti-hero that Hollywood had never seen before. Priest was danger and grace all at once, magnetic, clever, and impossible to ignore. He didn't need to yell or throw punches. One glance could silence a crowd. Every line he spoke hit like a bullet wrapped in silk. When a young black activist told him to join the revolution, Priest glared and snapped, "I'll be ready to go out and kill white folks, but until you actually pick up a gun and start the revolution, go sing your protest song somewhere else." That line, short, fierce, and real, hit the audience hard. It called out a world full of talk, but no action. Priest didn't believe in slogans or marches. He believed in freedom, his own kind of freedom. And then came the legendary ending. When a crooked cop tried to corner him and end his life, Priest smiled cool as ice, lifted his gun and said, "You don't own me, pig, and no dog tells me when I can split." Then he dropped the bomb. He'd already hired a hitman to take out the cop's family if he died. The crowd went wild. For the first time in Hollywood history, a black man faced down white authority and won, not with tears or surrender, but with fire, wit, and power. Superfly exploded. No big studio, no fancy marketing, just pure word of mouth. Within weeks, it raked in over $5 million, 10 times its budget. In cities across America, lines wrapped around the block as black audiences showed up proud and loud. They saw someone on screen who looked like them, standing tall, dressed sharp, living on his own terms. And the soundtrack? Curtis Mayfield's masterpiece took it to another level. Songs like Freddy's Dead and Superfly blasted from every radio, selling over 2 million copies and changing movie soundtracks forever. Priest's look, the slick hair, sharp suits, smooth moves, became the blueprint for cool. Overnight, Ron O'Neal wasn't just an actor, he was Superfly, a walking symbol of street freedom and fearless independence. But with every blinding spotlight comes a shadow. In 1973, Ron tried to chase the magic again, writing, directing, and starring in Superfly TNT. This time, Priest left Harlem for Africa, ready to fight for liberation and justice. But the world had moved on. The crowds didn't show up. The fire that once lit the theaters began to fade. Yet the legend of that white-suited rebel still burned bright. Enjoying the video so far? Smash that like button and subscribe to Fame Drop so you're here for the next one. The movie Superfly TNT hit the theaters with high hopes and crashed hard. Critics tore it apart and audiences barely showed up. The Guardian wrote, Ron O'Neal wanted to make Priest a political hero, but audiences only wanted him to stay dangerous. That one line summed it up. People didn't want a message, they wanted the myth. After that failure, Hollywood shut its doors tight. Ron was suddenly trapped in a box of his own creation. Every script that landed on his desk looked the same: drug dealer, pimp, gang boss. He said bitterly, "Superfly pulled me out of obscurity, but then it trapped me in my own shadow." People on the street whispered that he was a real-life dope dealer, unable to separate the man from the role. But Ron refused to back down. He kept grinding, taking parts in action flicks like The Master Gunfighter, 1975, Brothers, 1977, The Hitter, 1979, and the martial arts film, A Force of One, 1979, alongside Chuck Norris. Then came 1984, and a twist no one saw coming. Ron showed up as a Cuban colonel in Red Dawn, a rare Hollywood blockbuster that dared to cast a black actor as the main villain, and he killed it. He didn't need long speeches, just that stare, cold and powerful, that could freeze anyone in their seat. It reminded everyone why he was unforgettable, but even then, Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. The system that had once celebrated him couldn't imagine him as anything but Superfly. So Ron went back to where it all started: the stage. And that's where he truly shined. He dove into Shakespeare, owning roles like Othello, Macbeth, and Petruchio with pure fire and grace. Crowds rose to their feet, black and white audiences alike, giving him standing ovations. On stage, he wasn't Priest anymore. He was an artist, reborn and untamed. Throughout the 1980s, Ron stayed visible on TV, popping up in Freedom Road with Muhammad Ali, The Equalizer, 1985 to 1989, and A Different World, 1990 to 1992. Wherever he appeared, he carried himself like a gentleman, smooth, composed, and full of quiet intellect. He became a symbol of class, a reminder that black masculinity could be graceful and sharp at the same time. In 1996, he reunited with other blaxploitation legends, Pam Grier, Jim Brown, and Fred Williamson, in Original Gangstas. Ron called it a reunion of a generation that once dreamed of freedom. Even though the film didn't break records, it meant something deep to him. It was a nod to the past, a final bow to the golden age he had helped create. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Ron stepped out of the spotlight for good. What he left behind wasn't just a film legacy, it was an image. A man in a white suit walking through Harlem, sharp, fearless, yet alone. The actor who made Hollywood realized some men don't just play the lead, they are the lead. And when the lights go out, that power doesn't vanish. It lingers in the dark. Superfly had made Ron O'Neal a superstar overnight, but that same light burned him from the inside out. Behind the charm, behind those knife-edged eyes, was a man haunted by loneliness. In a 1980 interview, he confessed, "Hollywood gave me a smile and a chair, then pulled the chair away the moment I sat down." That single line carried a lifetime of pain. After Superfly, Hollywood loved the image, the cool, rebellious dealer, but not the man behind it. Studio execs couldn't see him as a father, a teacher, or a politician, just the hustler. Ron said that out of the hundreds of scripts he got, almost all were about guns, drugs, and women. "I knew what they wanted. Another Priest," he said. "But I'd already done that. I wasn't gonna copy myself." Turning down those roles meant losing money, a lot of it. But Ron stood firm. He went back to the small theaters of Los Angeles, taking any stage that would have him. By day, he taught acting classes. By night, he directed and wrote plays that dared to break the mold. His students said he was strict, real strict. One recalled, "He wouldn't let you act unless you truly felt it." He said even anger has rhythm. But beneath that tough exterior, people saw the sadness. The look of a man who had once stood at the top of the mountain, only to tumble back down into the fog. Friends remembered Ron as a perfectionist, intense, precise, and passionate to a fault. He could spend hours dissecting one line or arguing over a single lighting angle. One co-star recalled a day when a director asked him to act like Priest again. Ron's face went cold. He stormed off the set and never came back. He refused to live off his past, the colleague said. But the tragedy was, the past refused to let him go. As the spotlight dimmed, Ron's life grew quiet and hard. The fame had faded, and with it went the money. He struggled to keep up with bills, living in a small Los Angeles apartment, surrounded only by a few Superfly posters and an old guitar he sometimes strummed when memories got too loud. For years, he had no health insurance, no big studio checks, just silence and survival. He never talked publicly about his romantic life, but whispers circled about a relationship with a stage actress in the late 1970s, a love that couldn't outlast the weight of his world. Ron loved acting more than he loved himself. A close friend said that's exactly why no one could stay in his orbit for long. He gave everything to the craft, leaving nothing behind for love. But another darker shadow was already following him: his health. In the late 1990s, his weight dropped fast, but he hid it behind that same cool composure that once made audiences gasp. It wasn't until 2000, when he checked into treatment for pancreatic cancer, that friends learned the truth. Ron had been fighting the disease quietly for years. Even while sick, he refused to stop creating. He completed his final film, On the Edge, 2002, alongside rapper Ice-T. When filming wrapped, he turned to a co-star and said softly, "I don't know if I'll ever act again, but if this is the last time, I lived it right." Those words carried both peace and heartbreak, but illness wasn't the only burden. The same movie that made him a star also turned him into a target. Though Superfly broke barriers, many black critics and civil rights groups attacked it, claiming it glorified drug dealers and poisoned young minds. They said it romanticized fast money and street power. Ron fought back with conviction. "If they see Priest as a hero, that's their problem, not mine," he shot back. "I just showed the truth. A man trying to crawl out of the mud any way he could." Still, not everyone forgave. At one film screening in Chicago, a man approached him and said coldly, "You're the reason my son's in jail." Ron didn't argue. He just nodded, quiet as ever, and walked away. That moment showed his strength. No shouting, no excuses, just quiet dignity in the face of blame. Despite the storms, Ron stayed clean. No scandals, no drug problems, no tabloid chaos. In a business built on gossip, he kept his integrity untouchable. Yet behind that calm surface, loneliness lingered like smoke. By 1998, Ron had almost vanished from public life, showing up only for special retrospectives that celebrated the blaxploitation era. At a 2001 reunion, he stood among his old peers, smiling softly as fans cheered. When asked how it felt to look back, he said, "I used to be dangerous, not because of guns, but because I wasn't afraid to say what I thought." Then he added quietly, "That's the one sin Hollywood never forgives." In 2004, Ron O'Neal passed away at the age of 66. No headlines screamed his name, no big stars gave eulogies. Just a small group of friends and students gathered to say goodbye. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "Ron O'Neal departed quietly, the way he lived, proud and without needing anyone's pity. His end was gentle, but his legacy roared louder than ever." The tragedy of Ron O'Neal wasn't that he faded, it was that he was too far ahead of his time. Hollywood in the 1970s wasn't ready for a black man who could be powerful, intelligent, vulnerable, and dangerous all at once. But that's exactly what he was. Superfly's Priest wasn't just a dealer. He was a symbol of the black man trapped between the American dream and a system rigged to break him. Ron poured every drop of his pain, pride, and brilliance into that role. He became the metaphor, a man reaching for freedom in a world built to deny it. He lived and died for the art he believed in. The lights are gone now, the applause long faded, but his image still walks the streets of Harlem in people's minds. That man in the white suit, smooth, proud, carrying both danger and grace in every step. A faint smile on his lips, as if he knew the world was never brave enough to truly understand him. And that's the haunting beauty of Ron O'Neal's legacy, the shadow that never dies. When he passed in 2004, many thought his name would vanish with the blaxploitation wave that once shook the 1970s. But the opposite happened. The image of Priest still burns bright, a dangerous, beautiful, tragic icon. Today, whenever Hollywood dares to create a black anti-hero, the ghost of Ron O'Neal is right there in the frame. Before him, black characters were boxed in, either saints or sinners, never both. But Priest broke that mold wide open. He was seductive and scarred, confident and conflicted, both victim and controller. That duality made him real, a mirror of urban America, a man walking the line between power and pain. Enjoying the video so far? Smash that like button and subscribe to Fame Drop so you're here for the next one. Back then, critic Armand White wrote something that hit deep. If Shaft represents the victory of blackness, then Priest represents the doubt about that victory. And that right there said it all. Ron O'Neal wasn't just an actor, he was a revolution in motion. Before him, Hollywood was too comfortable showing black men as one-dimensional figures, the smiling servant, the ruthless criminal, or the noble warrior. Ron tore all that down with one stare. He brought something rare to the screen, a man of thought, power, and contradiction. A man who wanted freedom so badly, he was willing to dive into darkness to grab it. That hunger made him unforgettable. Film scholars later said Superfly planted the seeds for the kind of complex, layered characters played by Denzel Washington and Samuel L. Jackson, men who could be both terrifying and tender, strong and wounded at the same time. Ron's influence ran deep, through cinema, through music, through style. The image of Priest, that fur coat, wide-brimmed hat, and custom Cadillac, became more than a costume. It became culture. Rappers like Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, and Jay-Z all paid homage, calling Superfly the Bible of pimp culture, a symbol of confidence, defiance, and raw, self-made power. Jay-Z even rapped in the blueprint too. Superfly the way I move, Ron O'Neal cool. A direct shout-out to the man who defined swagger before the word even existed. To the black artistic community, Ron O'Neal remains living proof of courage and integrity. He refused to let Hollywood box him in, even when it cost him roles, fame, and comfort. He could have played the game, but instead, he chose exile over compromise. Director Spike Lee once said, "If it weren't for people like Ron, we wouldn't be here today." Filmmakers like Lee, John Singleton, and Antoine Fuqua have all credited him as a fearless symbol of creativity, standing up against Hollywood's prejudice and fear. After his death, magazines and scholars began to re-examine his story, not just as a fall from fame, but as a lesson. His life became a mirror for the pain so many black artists face, celebrated for one role, then trapped by it, yet hidden in that tragedy was victory. Ron cracked the ceiling open for those who came next. You can still feel his shadow in modern cinema. Watch Denzel Washington's conflicted cop in Training Day, or Michael B. Jordan's layered warrior in Black Panther, or Idris Elba's tormented detective in Luther. Each of them carries a bit of Priest's DNA, a man who wasn't purely good or evil, just real. Someone who dared to face the truth about power, survival, and the system that tried to contain him. And what's wild is how Ron's name, once forgotten through the 1990s, has come roaring back. Universities like NYU and Howard now teach Superfly in their black cinema courses, calling it a cornerstone of American urban realism. Critics who once dismissed it now see its honesty, its refusal to romanticize or sugarcoat Harlem's struggle. The film didn't preach, it showed. It held up a mirror to a generation of black youth stuck between the glitter of the American dream and the grind of generational poverty, trying to rise even when every door stayed locked. But Ron's legacy goes beyond film. His influence lives in classrooms, stages, and art schools across the country. Many of his former students from the Harlem Youth Arts Program grew up to become playwrights, directors, and Broadway stars. They carry his lessons about truth, about emotion, about refusing to fake it, into everything they do. Ron O'Neal didn't just change the screen, he changed the language of art itself. And even now, his ghost still walks that cinematic street, cool, defiant, and forever unforgettable. They still talk about him like he never left, with respect, with awe, with that kind of silence people save for legends. His former students and peers say, "Ron taught us never to fear failure. He said the real danger is when an artist stops trying." Those words hit like prophecy. Just like his character, Ron slipped away quietly, but his echo never stopped bouncing off the walls of time. Even 20 years after his passing, you can still feel him in the air. Whenever Curtis Mayfield's Superfly soundtrack hums through a Harlem bar or plays in a documentary about black culture, Ron's name drifts back, sometimes whispered with sadness, sometimes spoken with deep admiration. Because Ron O'Neal wasn't just another actor who came and went. He was a symbol of courage, a man who paid the price for staying true to his soul. He didn't chase fame, he chased truth. He didn't live to be adored, he lived to be understood. And that's exactly what made him dangerous. Not because of the roles he played, but because he dared to show humanity raw. No masks, no filters, no Hollywood polish. He held up a mirror to a world that preferred pretty lies, and he forced it to look at itself. Ron O'Neal lived the way real artists do, alone sometimes, misunderstood often, but always with purpose. He walked through that industry like a storm in slow motion, calm on the outside, chaos underneath. And though the spotlight faded, the echo of his presence still haunts film lovers, actors, and dreamers who know what it means to stand firm in a world built to break you. If this story pulled you in, then stick around, because there are more hidden truths buried behind those old Hollywood smiles. Turn on that notification bell, because every star that once made Tinseltown tremble had to pay a price, and that price always comes due. In a 1973 interview, when someone asked how he wanted to be remembered, Ron smiled with that calm, knowing look and said, "I want them to remember that I did everything with my heart, that for once, I made the world look straight at us, Black people, not through pity or fear, but through respect." That line alone could stop time. And maybe that's why, more than 50 years later, people still whisper his name like it's a secret spell. Ron O'Neal, the most dangerous man in Hollywood. Not because he carried a gun, but because he carried truth. The kind of truth that Hollywood tried to bury and never could.